Guys, I did it. I remembered to go live when I was supposed to go live on the countdown. Yay! Hello, everybody. My name is Carrow. I'm an urban fantasy author. I'm also the executive assistant over at the Epicverse, and I have kidnapped Epic Mike from Epicverse to come and share his vast wisdom with us today. For those of you who don't know, Carrow's Cawing is where I invite people who are way more cooler than I am and ask them lots of questions so that way I might be as cool as them one day. So thank you so much for coming over, Epic Mike. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, one, I am not being held against my will. I am completely safe. There's no sarcasm in my voice. There's no whatever tone you may be hearing. I am completely and utterly safe. Okay. You can't kidnap willing people. So, second of all, you are very cool. I am not cooler than you. I would say we're equally as cool.
Oh. I don't know. Your fro gives you like some bonus charisma points though.
That's fair, but like that's what I got. That's all I have going for me. If I cut my hair, totally different personality, everything. You'd be like, who is this guy?
You know, you're not wrong, because when I met you at MegaCon and you had your hair up in a ponytail, I didn't know who you were.
No, you didn't. It was pretty funny. Yeah, that was entertaining. I was like, it took me a second. I was like, oh, she doesn't know who I am right now. Gotcha.
Yeah, and then and then the fro came down. I was like, oh, you're that guy. Oh.
Yeah, you're like, sir, please back up. What are you doing? I'm like, I'm supposed to be here right now.
Yeah. I'm so sorry. But anyway, I have the inside scoop because I know who you are, but we'll go ahead and launch into the first question, which is, who are you? What do you do? Tell us about you.
Yeah, I am really, really, really bad at answering that question because I'm still not really quite sure what I do. But I'm Epic Mike. I yell a lot on the internet. I'm a rambling psychopath who somehow snuck his way into a large internet community and has gathered a small but vocal following, I guess I will say. I'm part of Geeks and Gamers. That's where most people know me from. I am associated with Geeks and Gamers. Been part of that group for a few years now. I'm also really good friends with Josiah Rises, and the thing that I've gotten the most notice from recently is me and him started a production company called Epicverse, which, let me see if I can fix my camera so it's actually the whole thing on there so I don't get yelled at by my marketing team. Like you didn't even show off the logo.
Oh, I got you. Yeah, I got you as well.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. So yeah, we started Epicverse together. And that's probably what I'm most known for now. And then I stream on YouTube and stuff as well. So yeah.
Yeah. I've been enjoying your commentary on Twitter, because I remember you made a comment about a movie and somebody's like, well, if you don't like it, go make your own. You're like, I do. And he's like, no, for real. And you're like, no, for real, I do make my own.
Yeah, I remember that. And I was like, he's like, yeah, no, whatever you say, man. And then he's like, oh, you're just making independent films? I'm like, yeah, that's kind of how that works. Like, if I worked for Hollywood, like we probably wouldn't be having this conversation right now. So yeah, I
don't know if you'd be allowed to talk to me.
I don't either. I'd have to say I'm not associated with Geeks and Gamers. Yeah, I'd have to pull a Zack Snyder and distance myself from everyone. Apparently, I wouldn't do that. I'm too much of a butthole to do that. I could not do that to people. If like people called me and they're like, "Hey, you can't associate with these people," I'd probably be like, "Yeah, I'm gonna keep doing it anyways." So, yeah.
Well, so can you share what inspired you to want to pursue independent filmmaking? Then?
Yeah. Another good question. I'm just trying to remember how to word this and also keep the answer short enough that I'm not rambling incoherently for a while. I have always been fascinated with storytelling. I actually recently talked about this on one of my streams. I wasn't able to read until I was like 7. Mm-hmm. For some reason, I don't know why I could not figure out words. It just never clicked with me. I could sound out words, all that stuff, but they never worked together. And then one day it just clicked and I figured it out. I guess my brain just oh, reading. Yeah. And then I couldn't stop. I was like a voracious reader. I'd read everything I could get my hands on. I read a lot of the classics when I was like 10, 11, 12. I read, Oliver Twist. I read H.G. Wells, War of the Worlds. I read The Time Machine. I read, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Things like that. I read an abridged version of Hunchback of Notre Dame. I will say that, things like that. So I read a lot of books when I was younger. And I just could not get enough of good storytelling. I grew up watching a lot of movies and television and stuff too, and like a lot of people do, but I just always was like, oh man, what would I do if I had my own stories, or what would I do if I was telling my own concepts and stories like that? And I used to have like a massive tub full of action figures, and I would like put together cities and towns, and it was just a really fun time. But I've been doing that my whole life, and I've been coming up with stories my whole life, and as I got older, I knew that I wanted to do something really specific, and I just wasn't sure what it was. At one point, I thought it was professional wrestling. When I got out of high school, I went to pursue being a professional wrestler. There was a couple different things why that didn't happen. And then I got married. We had our first kid shortly after getting married, and so I was like, well, now I got a kid, that probably isn't the way to go. And so I kind of just was working dead end jobs and stuff like that. But in order to like stay sane at some of these jobs, I would just like start to like craft stories in my head. And one time I crafted I still have the notebook. I crafted like an entire series, like a superhero series that I wanted to do. And it was like this team of superheroes and how they got together, and every theme of each character and who they were and why, where their story started and where it ended and why it ended that way and all this stuff. I put a lot of work into it, and I really liked it. And I was like, man, I wonder if I could get into television and movies. And so just over time, it kind of grew. Then I met Josiah, and we met, over a mutual love of movies and stuff like that. And then I got involved with Geeks and Gamers, and there was just a lot of conversations about, who's gonna do something about this. Like, there's nothing wrong with critiquing, and being able to critique is important. I think having a critical eye for media, for art, for entertainment, all of that stuff can be really important. It's very useful, but being good at critiquing something does not particularly mean that you're good at creating something.
Right.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there are warriors and there are builders. Warriors are excellent at fighting and destroying and pillaging and burning a town to the ground. Builders are the
Relatable.
ones that step in after. Yeah, and builders are the ones that step in afterwards and have to build something. It's not good enough to just be able to tear something down and leave a smoking crater. You have to be able to put something in its place that then it can become and flourish into something better than what was there before.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, that's kind of the philosophy behind it. Was like, hey, we should do something about this. We should make something. And so we talked about it and decided we wanted to start this independent film company, and here we are. That's the long answer of it.
That was a fantastic answer, though. I loved it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So you said you had a notebook. So like, do you have like a creative process? Does it start with like sticky notes and then suddenly becomes like a motion film, or like... I know we had a minor conversation about organization before we started.
Yeah, it's insane. Typically, the most common way that I come up with ideas is in the shower. That is like my creative space. So like what'll happen typically is I will be also listening to music will do this too, but shower is the most common. So what'll happen is like I'll be in the shower, and in my head, and this is gonna make me sound like a crazy person, but whatever. I'll be in the shower, and then like this person will walk up to me in the shower. Sometimes it's a man, sometimes it's a woman, sometimes it's some gangly monster creature or whatever. And I go, oh, hello. And what are you all about? And sometimes they have like an interesting story. Sometimes all they have is like a name. And I'm like, okay. It just kind of depends on what they say in that moment, and that's typically like that can lead to like interesting stories. I also do a lot of tabletop role playing, like D&D and other games like that, and that's typically how I create characters too. Is like one of them will show up and I'll be like, oh, you're fascinating. Can I like do something with this? I'm like, yeah, let's see what happens. That's kind of how it happens. Or I'll be like listening to music or doing something, and it'll trigger like a scene in my head. I'll be like, okay, what's this? Is this a movie? Is this a TV show? And typically like I have to like rewind and find out what happened before, and then find out what happened after, and that's how the story like kind of starts. Like that's like the little nugget that starts. you know, and it's different for everything, but that's kind of how it starts. Is It's like
Mm-hmm.
a weird idea or a screenshot of something, and then if I keep pursuing it forwards or backwards, or if I interrogate this like character that I've met, then all of a sudden, like, boom, we have an idea. Oh, okay, this is like a full-on story. This is like really becoming something now. And then it's just deciding where the medium is for it, because there's like differences in the mediums that they fall into, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about because the structure is different for all of them. So like with novel writing, it's more long form and you can play around with it and kind of bullshit in places.
Yeah.
Yeah, in film, it's a little bit, it has to be tighter because you have to hit like story beats at certain times. But comics is like where it's like really freaking tight. Like you can't fuck around with the graphic novels like whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so that's kind of how it happens. You know, some of the Epicverse stuff is, I don't know, some of the Epicverse stuff is a little bit different just because the ideas came differently. Like one of them that we did is called Magic. It's an animated short film, and I just saw this. I saw this little girl in my head, like this little like animated girl,
Mhm.
and I saw her holding an apple out to this guy. Like I didn't see the person she was handing an apple to at first. And I was like, "What's that about?" Okay, and then so I pursued that idea, and I was like, "Oh, okay, this is where the apple is, and this is why it fits in this story." The cool thing is, and this is a little like cool story, and this is to me the coolest part of entertainment, and it's what makes great stories and great art to me, is when you have like really cool serendipitous moments. So I had this idea, and what I didn't tell anybody when I wrote the script was that the girl had purple eyes. It was like a thing that was in my head, but I didn't tell anybody about this. So when we got an animator, her name was Kristen. She was straight out of grad school. She saw our company. She said, "Hey, I want to do like an animated project." And I'm like, "Well, we have an idea." So we gave it to her. She really liked it. And she's like, "Hey, the first thing she did was sketch out this little girl."
Mhm.
And she goes, "I don't know why I did this. And you can tell me if it's weird, but I thought she had purple eyes. So I gave her purple eyes." And I'm like, "Okay, you're hired. Like, that's it. Like, you're good." You know, so things like that happen, you know, or like the most recent we dropped a trailer for is Blood and Water.
Mhm.
The way that idea came about is we had a, yeah.
I'm
we
sorry, I
had
was
like
just pointing.
No, you're good. We had like a, me and Josiah were doing like a mad scientist thing. We're like, what if we did this thing in a movie? And I was like, oh, dude, what if we did that thing in a movie? And he's like, what would that movie look like? And I'm like, I don't know. He goes, do you want to write it? And that's Josiah's way of saying like, I'm too busy to do this right now.
Mhm.
But also like, it depends on how excited I am too. And I
Mhm.
was like, yeah, I think I can cook something up. So I sat down and I was like, all right, how would I do this? And I was like, well, I know now how I would do it, but in what setting would I do it? And Josiah loves Vikings, stuff like that. And I was like, you know what?
Relatable.
I kind of want to, yeah, see? And I was like, if my bro likes Vikings, maybe we need to do a Viking movie. That's one of the things we don't have on the slate.
Mhm.
So I was like, I have an idea for a Viking movie. And then I met the character Ivar, and I was like, oh, you're really cool. And he's like, yeah. And then the story kind of just started playing out from there, and I wrote the script. And then it just so happened that I, you know, also envisioned certain people in those roles, and those people were available to take the roles. So
Oh, nice. That's always
Yeah.
good.
yes, absolutely.
I was thinking, I'm gonna go on a rabbit trail and come back here. I promise.
You're welcome to. Yeah.
But when you're talking about the ideas that come in the shower, there's a book that's written by Quincy Jones, the music composer. And
Okay.
it's called Notes for Life, and he actually talks about how when he would work with artists or he was creating his own stuff, he would always make sure that he was in the D state. So it was when your brain was like the most relaxed state it could be. And he says it's different for everybody, but he would make some of his musicians come in at like 1 a.m. in the morning because they were too tired to like bitch about things, but they would also just like, you know, they would come out better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
There's a really cool like it's different in different places. Like they said, like there's like a thing in like sports. It's called being in the zone. It also happens when you're playing video games sometimes. Like when I used to play like Call of Duty a lot and stuff, where all of a sudden you like lock in, and it's like a weird zen state in your mind where like you're just locked in, and like everything that's happening around you is like kind of slow motion, and you're just like ripping through whatever. It's kind of similar. There's like a weird thing, and I'm like, oh, my mind is wandering, and it's different than like ADHD where I can't focus on one thing for any amount of time. It's like, oh, what's that? Okay. And I'm like watching this thing happen, and I'm like, okay, what is this? And then like it starts to kind of come into focus, and then there have been times where I've had an idea or like a little snapshot, and it really isn't anything, or it's a similar idea to something I've already thought about before, and I'm like, okay, we got to scrap that or whatever. But then there are ones where I see it, and I'm like, man, this evokes a feeling. I can't let this one go. I'm kind of hooked on this idea, and I don't really want to let this idea go. So yeah.
Well, so then when you're, I guess let me transition to another question there. Since we're talking about like creative challenges, right? Like, filtering through bullshit ideas and good ideas and stuff like that. When you're working on making your films and all of that, like what are your biggest obstacles? Is it like the actual creative process itself, or is it like the production or post-production?
Yes. All of it is, yeah. Making movies. I mean this in context because I want to preface this, like, it's the same. I'm not pulling a Hassan and saying like making movies is so hard, but making movies is hard. It's all relative. Everything's relative. So forgive me for, I'm gonna rabbit trail for a second to say this because I think it's important for creatives to hear this. I used to work in restoration. Like I worked in like water damage, mold damage, fire damage restoration for a long time. And one of my job descriptions was crisis management when it came to my job. So you get a call on the phone and you have a hysterical person on the other line that, like a stay-at-home mom, for instance. I'm not saying, and she goes, my kid flushed the toilet and the toilet exploded and there's water everywhere and it's leaking down into my basement that we just remodeled, and all of everything downstairs is completely ruined. I don't know what to do. So now I have to respond to this person on the phone, say, hey, I'm going to be there. I'm going to take care of things. Give me some information so I have it. And then I get loaded up and I drive over to that person's house. My first job when I walk in the door is to assess how is this person handling the crisis that they're dealing with. And one of the things that I heard a lot, all the time, is they go, they're upset, they're frustrated, whatever the thing is, and they go, I know, other people have it worse than me. I know other people, the first world problems, stuff like that. And I'd stop them, not to be rude, but hey, I'm like, listen, a crisis is a crisis. Whether it's I don't have any food and I'm going to die, or there's water pouring down in my 3-story home, my $3-story $1 million home, and I don't know what I'm going to do about it because it's stressing me out. It's still a stress regardless. It's just relative to what you're going through right now. And what I used to use a lot is I'm like, we don't play oppression Olympics. The point is not to diminish what you're feeling by comparing to something else somebody else is going through. The difference is that you go, okay, yes, other people have it worse, so I'm not going to respond to this by treating anybody like they're less than, or respond in a way that forgets the perspective of where I'm at. But I'm also not going to diminish what I'm feeling in the moment. So I say that because when I say making movies is hard, making movies is hard. It's a lot of work. It is a lot of moving parts. You're essentially, as a writer, and I think you can appreciate this, like if having written novels, you're essentially your imagination has given you something, and you go, okay, what do I do with this? And it's like, write it down on a piece of paper. And you go, okay, so you write it down on a piece of paper, and then you have to take that piece of paper and you have to show it to a multitude of people, an entire team of people who all have very specific things that they're good at. This person's good at lighting. This person is good with using a camera. This person's a director. This person is a producer who's going to be able to put together a budget for this whole thing. And this person is good at carrying heavy shit. And this person is good at setting lighting in a specific way so that the lighting guy can have exactly what he wants. There's a ton of moving parts. And those people all look at this piece of paper that came out of your imagination and have to make that thing exist in reality, with people playing pretend. with your piece of paper, and then that piece of paper, or that thing that they played pretend with, they now have to show to people, and those people that watch that thing have to like it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's insane. It
Mm-hmm.
makes no sense. It's psychotic. It is the most delusional thing I think anybody could ever conceive of, but at the same time, it's a massive market and people love it. And so like, I would say all of it is hard. I'd say the hardest part, if I had to categorize, is definitely production, like actual boots on the ground. You know, pre-production is a lot of like, okay, let's get things ready. What are we gonna need? What are we planning for? It's like, that's the pre-vacation phase. Hey, I'm packing my bags. Oh yeah, I got everything on my list that I wanted, blah blah blah. And then you walk out the door and you get in your car, and then you get to the airport and you go, I forgot my socks. I have no socks. What have I done? And you have to figure out how to manage with no socks, or how you're going to get socks at the air, you know. That's kind of what it's like. The production stuff can be very difficult. There's a lot of physical time and effort that goes into unloading and setting up and moving things around and stuff like that. That stuff takes a lot of work. And then it's, let's go play pretend and hope that the people playing pretend do a good enough job having read this piece of paper to do something cool with it, you know? Yeah, that's another long-winded answer. So
no, it's a great answer. What are you talking about? So when you have, I guess when you're working with like the production struggles and stuff like that, like, is it kind of like, when you have to overcome that, is it just kind of like being creative in a different way with making things just work, or do you usually have to send somebody to Walmart to get the things that you need? Or
it depends, you know. Sometimes it is, hey, we don't have the things we need. What do we need? What can we use with what we have? Sometimes it's we need, you know, like, how are we going to fix this? And it's like, yeah, we need duct tape and spray paint and paper clips. So now we have to send somebody to go get paper, all of those things. It really just depends. You know, you try to be as prepared as you possibly can with like okay, this is the general idea, because one of the things in pre-production is when you have a good team, they go, okay, I have a default kit of things I know we're going to need, but now we're going to add in these other things that we know we might run into. You know, you also have a prop guy that's in charge of making the props, making sure the props are working properly, things like that. You have a makeup guy who's going to make everybody look like they're supposed to look. You have a set designer who goes, hey, this empty room needs things in it to make it look cool, or this room, or these 2x4s and all of this wood needs to go together to make a building look like this or whatever. So you have people that do all of that stuff as well. And so, yeah, you try to be as prepared as possible, but yeah, sometimes you have to go run to Walmart and try to do stuff, or sometimes something breaks and you go, we have to improvise and I don't know what to do. So like, let's make it work with what we got, you know? Yeah.
A lot of on the fly.
Yeah.
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 So you mentioned earlier that you were a voracious reader when you were little. So when you create stories now, is there like a particular like theme or something that you kind of like to, you know, have consistent within your storytelling, or are you just kind of playing with different concepts as they arrive?
I play with different concepts. I kind of write a little bit of everything. I read a lot of different things. I think sci-fi, fantasy is definitely my leaning. I like sci-fi, I like fantasy, I like both of them. And then really deep down, there's like a very like sensitive part of me that really likes superheroes. Superheroes are like an intimidating thing to me because it's been done so well to such a high level that I get intimidated when I've come up with ideas. Also, I think sometimes like certain superheroes, like as a kid, I remember kind of rang true to like how I'd want to be as a person, you know, like, you know, a person that like makes people feel safe, and a person that like, you know, does things with excellence. And so there's like a lot of that, but I love superhero stuff. That's also like really near and dear to my heart, but that kind of encompasses fantasy sometimes, or sci-fi as well, but that's kind of where my leaning is. But I've written dramas. I could write horror if I really wanted to. I'm a big scaredy cat, so I try to not to write horror. I could probably write romance, and the one thing I am scared to death of and don't want to write, but I will probably stretch myself to write, is comedy. Because to me, comedy is one of the hardest things to do right, because what's funny to you is not funny to everybody else.
Right.
So I have to figure out like what is going to be funny to everybody that's watching this, or as many people as I can, you know?
Yeah. I know when I lived in England, it was like a different kind of humor there, because they say it's dry, but like in England, the one thing that they really like is making socially awkward situations for people. And they think that's really funny. Where I guess, like, because I don't want to say that as Americans we're like desensitized to it, but we're kind of like, whatever, move on, right?
Yeah.
So we don't always think that's funny. So for us, it's kind of like, at least what I noticed with American humor, I should say, it's like watching somebody like basically climb up that tree by accident, and they're having a terrible time, and you're laughing at it while they try to fall out of the tree at the same. That's the stuff we find that's funny. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I like British humor a lot. There's a, like, Monty Python obviously is like the gold standard, you know, but Benny Hill, Blackadder, there's some really funny stuff like that. Yeah, I very much appreciate it. I think Western, or like not Western, American humor can be really good too. It just really depends on what's going on, and like you said, like, yeah, there's like a different like take on all of it. There used to be a show back in the day in Britain. They came out of the UK called Crank Acres. Oh no, I'm gonna remember. Trigger Happy TV.
Okay, yeah.
And they used to have like one of their really go-to things was to have people in mascot costumes doing ridiculous things. So they had these like squirrels, and they would run up to people in the park and just like manhandle these people. Like there was like a guy like fishing, and it like ran up to him and grabbed the guy and like threw him and grabbed his tackle box and like threw it in the river and everything. And then they like kicked dirt at him and left. And I was like, what? Or like one time it was like a traffic stop where like there was a red light. They had a guy in a snail costume standing on the corner, and he got down on all fours and very slowly crawled across the way. And it was like 2 or 3 lights, and everybody just had to sit there honking and screaming at this guy. And I don't know why I found that to be like particularly hilarious. So yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah. And that's why comedy's scary to me, because really good comedy like is like gold to me. I just can't, like, I don't know. But I also have a weird sense of humor, and so I know that something that's funny to me isn't always funny to everybody else. And like, I think people throwing up is like one of the funniest things in the world to me. Some people are like, throw up grosses them out. I don't know why, but like watching shows like Jackass, where like they'd make Steve-O swallow like a toy car and then he like gets sick and throw it up. I thought that was the funniest thing in the world. I would die at stuff like that. And other people would be like, dude, why do you think throwing up so funny? I'm like, I don't know, but I think it's hilarious. So yeah, that's comedy's scary, but it's something I want to challenge myself to one day be able to figure out and do. So
yeah, there was so I lived in England, and I had like a British step parent for a little while, and I was there when we had Chicken Run, the claymation movie, come out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so what was extra funny for our family is it came out in England first, so we all went and watched it. And there's 3 American jokes in there, and so when they happened, my dad and I laughed in this completely silent theater, and nobody else did, and we're all like, okay. But then we went to America, and Chicken Run had just come out there, and so my mom and I went to go watch it with my cousin, and that's when we learned that there's 3 British jokes in there that we laughed at and nobody else did.
That's really funny.
Yeah. Wow. So that if you want to, I don't know, I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah. I love Chicken Run, so I'm
it's so good.
Watch it soon. Yeah.
It's so good. I love Chicken Run. I love claymation.
I do too. I loved Wallace and Gromit growing up too. Like it's so like subtle, and like it's such a weird thing. Like, but yeah, I loved Wallace and Gromit. So yeah, I really dig that.
Oh, it's so good. Let's see, what else do I have on here to interrogate you about? Even though you're here of your own free will, and I didn't bully you to come on here at all.
I was not forced to be here against my will at all. I am safely here under no threat of violence or duress.
Okay. I'm so happy. So I guess we'll move into like a more logistical question, which is when we have to talk about like the ching behind the production and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I know some people have angel investors, some people do crowdfunding and things like that. Not that you have to tell me like the deep intricacies of how you fund your films, but like,
yeah. Josiah pays for everything.
Oh yeah.
That
was the easiest answer.
That we make that joke a lot because that's he pretty much pays for everything. You know, he's a successful YouTuber. He knew this was going to be expensive getting into it. You know, sometimes, I mean, other people have invested a lot of time and money. We had a lot of people work for like pro bono. Sweat equity is very much a thing in movies. But yeah, when it comes down to like where the money is coming from, typically like almost all of it is coming from Josiah.
Okay.
Yeah, right now. That's what we're trying to fix that. But at the moment, that is what we have. Yeah.
Okay. That was it. Thank you.
Super simple question, but it's also like, it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Movies are a lot of money. Yeah.
Yeah. I know when, I mean, on the production side of things that I've seen, it's like, yeah, this person's like charging this much per hour and stuff like this. And this is when I worked at a game studio and they were talking about doing like a live action trailer. And I remember like watching the bill come in. And I was like, oh, wow, that's like really expensive for 3 minutes. Okay, cool. I didn't know that.
Yep. And that's why we did shorts, because shorts means we can do multiple for cheap. And the thing is, like, we can do good movies for cheap. Like, we don't like $20 million can make a really, really, really great movie. You don't need $200 million. $200 million, it should be like a perfect movie, or at least feel like a perfect movie, and they haven't recently. So yeah, that's it. Money is interesting. There's a crux where it stops paying well, like that the amount of money that you're spending doesn't justify the making the film any better. You know, you have like a movie like Oppenheimer, which costs like, I think, a budget of $100 million. That's pretty close with no CGI and all practical effects, especially nowadays and stuff, and the star-studded cast that was in there. $100 million makes sense. Maybe it could have been cheaper than that still, but I'm not like, oh, what are you doing? When Disney makes like a $200 million film, and I'm not just crapping on Disney, but in general, you see somebody spend $200 million on a film, you expect that the quality is that high, but it's not. In fact, it's actually worse, and it's probably worse because you spent that much money on it. So, yeah.
Yeah, throwing money at it doesn't make it better. Okay.
Yeah. Nope. It does. It can with some things, but there's a critical mass where the money stops helping, and it makes things worse because you just have people doing it for the money. There's a lot of people in the industry that will work for much less to do stuff that they enjoy doing. So, yeah.
So I'm going to deviate real quick because when we were talking about like crews and expenses and stuff like that, one of my friends that works up in Canada, he was telling me that the crews that he knows that work for film and all that up there haven't been able to get work for like 7 months, right? Yeah, it's kind of, it's savage. But I didn't know if that like had a ripple to you. Like, are you like finding like a surplus of people, or is?
We're not. I mean, yes, there's always a surplus. I would argue there's, for everybody working in the entertainment industry, I think maybe 20% of those people are actually working right now, like period. And maybe if everything's clicking on all cylinders, maybe 30% of those people are working. There's always a lot of people. I think that we're starting to see an influx of people that are actively working in the industry at like a higher level, having more free time or not having projects. But for the most part, there's always people. I mean, and just in our community alone, just kind of within like the circle that we kind of all know of people we know, I can list probably 4 or 5 people that have classically trained as actors or have worked, as, to do music or something, that have worked in the industry in some capacity. And in fact, that's kind of what happened with we call like our leadership the 3-headed dragon, because there's me and then there's Josiah. And then I brought a friend of mine to kind of look at things. His name is Chaz, and he's worked in the industry for 20 years. And so he had a lot of stories and experience, and he saw what we were doing. He goes, yo, I really want to help. And he became an integral part of everything we were doing. So he kind of became like the third pillar on our like table, you know, so to speak. And so, yeah, we now call it three-headed dragon. But, yeah, there's definitely a lot. There's always a lot of guys, and there's a lot of people that you'd be surprised have worked on film or worked on worked on television or something, and then just didn't really do anything with it to pursue it as a career because it paid decent, but they knew that it wasn't going to be consistent. So,
yeah, that's a. So I mean, speaking. Okay, so consistency. Like when I talk to you, you're always doing something. Like I know you're always doing something. You're writing, or you're having meetings, or you're talking to editors and stuff like that. So, but I know you're not always like in the production phase. So like, is that like more like seasonal planning if you plan that?
Yeah, we're not doing it conventionally. So like the 6 short films, it's kind of like bang, 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 you know, when we have the time to get them ready. But like, yeah, if I had it my way, it would be something where, yeah, like you do X amount of projects a year and then like you just chill most of the rest of the time. But that's just not viable, especially because we're still kind of building the company to launch officially and stuff. And so there's a lot of moving parts of like, okay, well, we want to address this. Do we try to address it, or do we bring somebody in to address it? You know, what's the most efficient way to do that? So yeah, I hope that made sense.
No, it made perfect sense. I was just curious because I know sometimes they have to like schedule things, and film and TV is kind of like book publishing where it's like everything takes like an eternity to get from here to over to here. So
yeah, it depends. As an independent company, and this is kind of a strategy of ours, we're leaner and meaner, and so we can pivot really quickly. You know, you have to it's like I don't know if you know ships, but it's like a little mini. I think it's called a sloop versus like a frigate. Like a frigate takes a long time to turn, and it requires a lot of effort and work from the teams to get it to change course. But it can fire it has a lot of firepower. These smaller, like a smaller sloop, it's like we could turn quickly, we could maneuver, but like if we're gonna get in a fight with somebody, or you know, we're gonna have to work, we're gonna have minimal stores of powder and all this stuff. It'll be hard to fight, and you really have to make every shot count. Versus like when you're a giant company, you can kind of let things fall through the cracks, or you don't have to always make sure everything is perfect. You can just go like, that's acceptable enough, let's just get it done, you know?
Okay. Yeah.
So I know the trailer, or like I watched the trailer on your guys' YouTube when you were introducing Epicverse, and about how you wanted to go and make the stuff that you wanted to see out there versus the stuff that we currently have.
Yeah.
So I guess for you, what is like the big impact that you want your films to have?
Ooh, that's a really good question too. That's a very good question. I mean, the simplest answer is I just want people to be entertained. I just really want somebody to watch my movie, and I want them to go, man, that was worth my time. I think that probably is the biggest thing for me, is I want to know that what I'm doing isn't wasting people's time. That they feel like their time was worth it when they invested in me to sit down and watch like a movie that I wrote, or a movie that I produced or directed, or all three, or whatever, or just simply was there to help, you know, work on while a team of people did all the other work, you know. But yeah, I want people to be entertained. I want people to enjoy it, and I want to feel like their time is just as valuable as my time was investing in the product. So yeah.
That's a good impact. We like that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So I've only got one more question for you, and then we can freeform it after that if you want. But when you but when you do interviews, what's something that you wish you could talk about?
Oh man, I talk about so many things. I typically get a chance to talk about just about anything I want, because you guys are always so nice to me. But and I'm still getting used to being interviewed. Sometimes I don't realize that that's what's happening. I'm like, no, we just talked for like 2 hours, and they're like, no, that was an interview, buddy. And I'm like, oh, my bad. I really, really, really enjoy talking about my creative process. So kudos to you for this, because you already started doing that. I really do enjoy talking about my creative process because I love hearing other people's perspective. I like hearing how other people got to where they got. You know, that's something that I really enjoy talking about a lot. And I probably, another thing that I wish I could talk about more, is probably more like questions of like life experience stuff. You know, like I do more than like play movie, you know, make movies. I play video games, stuff like that. I'm a dad of 3, so like I really enjoy talking about that stuff, and I don't, you know, I don't get a lot of like time to talk about that stuff, you know, because we're usually focused on one other thing. So I guess that's one thing. And then I also really do enjoy talking about conspiracies. I can rabbit trail with the best of them on those ones. I'm rusty. There's a lot of new conspiracies that exist that I haven't caught up with. But back in the day, yeah, I was all in conspiracies and, you know, clone replacements and Flash clones, and this actor has been dead for 15 years and we didn't know it. And yeah.
What's your favorite one?
My favorite conspiracy. That's a really good question too. Oh my gosh, I'm like flipping through all the different ones. Probably my favorite conspiracy. Man, there's some really good ones. I'm gonna go with a broad category. Okay. I really like lost civilization ideas. I love the idea of like and when I say that, I kind of mean like just like lost history in general. Like I think it's really cool that we have like dragons in myth across the board, like culturally and geographically. I like that in almost every country and every like people group, they have stories about dragons. They just look different. I don't know why that fascinates me, but like I guess like talking about something like that, like, oh, you know, like a Loch Ness monster kind of thing, that kind of stuff is really cool to me. I don't know why. I kind of dig that stuff. So that's probably my favorite. Yeah.
I always like how mythos, even across civilizations, they always still have unifying factors in them. Yeah. So, for example, like Freya, Ishtar, Aphrodite, right? So those are all goddesses of love, but they're all also goddesses of war. And they all have a story about how they were warlike, they became love-like, and then they caused a war, right? Yeah.
It's kind of fascinating, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really good. Yeah. Yeah, I really like that too. Yeah, I think stuff like that is really fascinating, and it makes me question like the human experience. Like, if we could all just like connect this stuff and not connect it in a way where it feels like we have to like validate our own thing, but like maybe there's some kind of universal truth there. What does that universal truth look like? Like, I don't know. There's obviously some kind of thing. You keep tying these two concepts together. Maybe these two concepts are like they fit way better together than you realize. So what does that look like? How does that affect the world around us, you know? Yeah.
Talking like a storyteller.
Something like that. Yeah.
Something. All right. We have 15 minutes that you can do with as you see fit with. So what do you want to do for 15 minutes?
Well, I want to ask you. I'm gonna interview. Now you're getting grilled. Okay.
Oh, okay.
We flipped the script. Like you walked in, and you saw that I had broken loose out of my chair, and you were like, "What? Where did he go?" And then like, I grabbed you and I threw you in a chair, and I'm like, "Ha! Now you're being interviewed." I want to hear your creative process. I love hearing people's creative process because I love hearing people get to things. So I want to like, I'm going to give you a scenario, but then please feel free to talk more about it. But like, how do you get an idea for like a book? You're like, oh, okay. Like I'm going to write this. This is going to be a story that I'm going to write and turn into a book. How do you get there?
I actually did that today. So I'll walk you through that process. Nice. So it starts with, I like that idea, and then I end up going for a run. So instead of being in the shower, I go out and I run. So it's there's a thing that's referred to as monkey brain, where people with monkey brain can only meditate when their body's in motion. So, and they always and they're always kind of like, oh, that means you have ADHD. It's like, no, it just means that that's just how my brain works. So this morning I had an idea, and I'll go ahead and just share it. But I like the idea of a superhero group that had a figure called Den Mother, and Den Mother's job was to keep home base safe, right?
That's awesome.
Yeah, and so, because, and part of why I wanted to do that was I always thought about, like, when Batman would leave and Alfred would take the night off, and then somebody would break into the Batcave, right?
Yep.
Yeah, always. There's like clockwork.
Always, yeah.
Yeah, and so while I was running, I was thinking about the Den Mother concept, and I'm like, who is this figure? And it's like, if you're protecting superheroes, who's this person going to be? And what kind of superheroes are we talking about? And then I ended up making that character have like their own kind of like mythical tie with like, like the whole like, I did bad shit and I guess I'll just protect these people for a little bit. But then usually what happens is halfway through trying to flesh out this concept, I want to think about like an emotional impact that this character should have. And the reason I think about the emotional impact is because we have like shit memories, right?
Yes.
Most of the time. So the actual memory is shit, but the emotional memory is really good. And a good example is, think about a teacher that you had in second grade, and how did that person make you feel versus what is something they taught you, right? So everybody remembers that. So I'm always kind of like, what is the emotion that I want people to have with that? And I really wish people like who wrote books and did movies in Hollywood would actually think about that a little bit more, because what a lot of them do when they create some of these shallow characters is because there's like no emotional connection for us. We end up like disliking them a great deal. And then we say it's bad writing, which on one point it is, but I think it's because we didn't take it to like that slightly deeper level in the writing process. That we, in some places where we have forgiveness, we don't have any of them because now we're just nitpicking. So and then usually by the end of it, like by the run, like, and I'm cooling down and stuff like that, I'll let it percolate for another day. And if I'm still holding on to it, then I'll write it down and start fleshing it out into a story format with beats.
I like that. Yeah. Are you an outliner?
How did you know?
I just guessed. I was taking a shot in the dark here. Based on what I know of you, you seem like you might be an outliner.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I outline, but I don't like hold myself hostage to it. So sometimes like for like this ghostwriting project that I'm doing for a client, we had a conversation and they said like, I want these two characters to get together. And so I tried really hard to get these two characters together, right? Yeah. Right down to doing like the hypothetical, like, let's just throw them in a room and see what happens. And I couldn't make it work. I could not make it work at all. And so what I did was like, well, I have to make something work. And so I started throwing other characters in there. I was like, okay, here we go. We got chemistry. We've got something going on. So then I had to go back and be like, can I please change it?
I like that.
So,
so if you're telling a story and you go, okay, you have character A and character B, and character A and B don't have any chemistry. Like, what is it about two characters that not, like, how would you describe to somebody why those two characters didn't work?
Well, I think I have an unfair advantage on that because I have a degree in psychology, so I can actually get like really clinical with explaining it, right?
Yeah.
So I can get right back into like, it's like, I know you want them to bang, but like this person has this kind of personality and their focus and motivations are on this, and this person, blah blah. So I can really dig into it that way, versus like I'm just not feeling it. Like it's just not working. I'm not jiving. It's not my vibe right now.
Yeah, I like that. I like the balance of emotion versus like logic and stuff, because like with things that I write, like I like to, one of the things that I really want to do and I really want to strive for is having layers in our movies, even in our short films, and it's not an insult, because I think some people might take this as an insult, and it's not supposed to be an insult, but it just means that like when you watch a movie, you go, okay, here's the movie. Wow, I like this. But if you look down here, you'll find like when this character did this, or I noticed this thing about the film, and then you keep going and you go, I didn't even notice that, and you go, well, did you notice this, or did you notice this up here, and that these like themes are like interwoven through, or whatever, things like that. I love that kind of stuff too. And I think that that's another thing, a pitfall of writers is either too shallow of a character or too complex of a character, and the audience can't relate to them because they're so complex. And it's
They're
like,
so complex.
yeah, they're so different. You just wouldn't understand them, and you're like, no,
They're not like other girls.
Yeah, it's like humans are pretty simple. It's just about how you approach that simplicity. You know, it's like I tell people with tropes. Tropes are not inherently a bad thing about storytelling. They're bad when they're used incorrectly, or they're
They're
overly
crutch.
used. Yes. Yeah. But it's like, if you know that a trope works, use it, because the audience doesn't really care about the trope. They just care about, how does it make me feel? You know, it's like a good example that I talk about is the Fast and Furious movies. They are not good movies.
No.
They're the stories sometimes are like a mess. The first one's basically Point Break with cars, like, but the stories sometimes are like a mess. This guy's uncle got killed in a car accident, so now he's angry, and that made him become a drug kingpin. So now we have to drive cars really fast to make him not sell a nuclear warhead because he's trying to get his next fix.
Make sure you get all the cars in there, so that way we can make sure that we're, you know, representing our sponsors correctly.
Yeah. Yep. Like, get the full shot, get the full frame. Yeah. Like, example I use, and it's so dumb, but it works, and I hate that it worked, is you have, I think it's Fast and Furious 6, and The Rock's in it. And The Rock gets shot with a like grenade launcher, and of course he like survives. He's fine, but he breaks his arm, and so he's in the hospital, and his arm is broken. Okay, and then shit goes down outside the hospital, like a couple blocks away, and he's like, "I gotta save my people. I gotta do something." And they're like, "You know, you can't. Like, you're hurt or whatever." And he goes, yeah, and he just stands up and he like looks at his arm. He goes, "Daddy's got to go to work," and he like rips the cast off. And then in like the next scene, he's like holding a minigun in his bare hands and like shooting it. And I'm like, listen, first of all, that's not how miniguns work. Secondly, that's not how broken arms work. You don't just get to tell the broken arm to stop being broken. Yeah, like, but
it was so macho, so cool.
It's so stupidly entertaining that I enjoyed it. I was like, God, that is such a great line, because it's so stupid. Like, it's so dumb. But like, in the same vein of that, so like, I had a fun, that my emotion was, this is really funny, and it's silly, but I like the silliness. Another example that I'm quite critical of is the movie Knives Out. Because the twist, which I won't spoil what the twist exactly is, but the twist is, it's dumb. The answer to the question of what's happening is dumb. The murder mystery, the solve is dumb. It's a dumb concept. You're like, what? That's the stupidest thing. That's the dumbest way to have gone about this. And I know that Brian Johnson thought that was really clever, but it wasn't. It wasn't as clever as he thought it was clever. It was a very meta, tongue-in-cheek way of doing a story that is cheapened because it doesn't have any more depth other than like, gotcha, you know, versus like when you read an Agatha Christie novel and you go, I don't know who killed this person. Maybe they all killed him. Maybe everybody's, you know, you have Hercule Poirot, who's like the greatest detective like in the world. And he's going, I don't know. I think all of these people are lying to me. I'm probably also in danger, and I may have killed the guy. I don't know anymore. Like, that's really good. That's great storytelling, you know? Yeah. And so I think that that's something that's missing. I do agree with filmmaking is that how can I make people feel something? But then consequentially on the other side of it is studios that know that that's a thing that audiences want and then manipulate them. And something that you'd be really surprised about, a lot of people would be, if you want to know whether like a movie really can stand up or to the test of time, is take out the music. Go watch a movie without the music and go, can you still enjoy this movie? And you will find that there are some movies, especially more recent modern movies, that are not as entertaining. You know, they're not as good. Like, you're like, wait a minute, like, I don't know, you know.
So my husband and I went out for our date lunch, right?
Yeah.
And in the background there was a movie that was playing. I couldn't hear it. I could only see it.
And I couldn't hear the dialogue either, but I was sitting there, and he could probably vouch if he's still in the chat. But I started bitching about every scene that was cut at one point. I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, this is like the most shit thing ever. And like at one point, like the main character, who's supposed to be like this beautiful character, right, is trying to move through a crowd, and they won't get out of her way. And you know, in some cases, it's like a struggle to like get through this body of people. And then like this individual who, they're not ugly, but they're not like remarkable either. And so they walk into the room, and suddenly like it's all eyes on them, and they're walking, and people are partying for them, and like all this other stuff. And I was like, look, I mean, like, I was born at night, but not last night, and I know which one of those would actually get that reaction. So like, what the fuck, like. So.
Yeah, the suspension of disbelief has gotten wider in Hollywood. Yeah, you have to take like bigger leaps, and you're like, yeah, I am all for trying unique casting and interesting casting choices. What I'm not for is trying to force an idea because you just thought, well, I want to cast this person because I think it'll, I don't know,
work
check
better.
a box or work better, you know?
Yeah.
Like one of my favorite castings, like in as Shakespeare, is Kenneth Branagh's Much Ado About Nothing. He cast Denzel Washington as the prince, and his brother, his direct brother, Keanu Reeves. And it slaps. At no point during this movie did I ever stop to think that these two were not brothers. I completely believed it because Denzel Washington is a phenomenal actor, and he's so good at delivering Shakespeare that like I forgot. I literally did. Completely forgot. I was like, yeah, that is your brother, and he's a piece of garbage. Like, you know, that to me is the best part of storytelling, is when you can do something like that. Like, you know, but yeah.
We were talking earlier about making ideas and stuff like that, so I have to like pull up my book. So this was the first book that I wrote, and it was actually a debate between me and my husband about what like an eternal being would become like over time, right? That's how this started, but the book is actually about the friendship between this main character and her magical sword.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and that was really what it was about overall. I'm so tempted to rewrite this like nobody's business. Do you do that with your scripts at all? You're like, fuck, I'm going to rewrite it, or do you just like, no, we're done. We've passed this point of no return?
So yeah, I can be like that if I go back and reread it. I am okay. So Josiah's an outliner like you. Josiah will outline. And then typically what'll happen is he'll look at his idea and he'll go, yeah, this is really good. And then he'll go back again later and try to rewrite and keep tweaking. Even day of he's tweaking. I will write a first draft from my memory in my head and go, yeah, that's probably good. And then I remember the only reason I'm writing a second draft is because I have been told by so many people and so many great authors and writers that your first draft is terrible and you have to rewrite it. That's why I'll rewrite my first draft. Typically the second draft, I'm like, I think the first draft was great, so I guess we'll go and fix something. And then I'll read the second draft and I'm like, that is definitely better, but I would have been just as happy with the first draft. You know, that's not a good thing, but like that's part of my process. There is like, yeah, I'm a stream of consciousness writer, and then I will put it on paper, and I typically go, that looked good in my head, it's probably good, and we can just move on. But sometimes that, you know, that can miss things. It also gets really hinky when you start dealing with like a lot of characters, because then like the webs start to branch, and you're like, oh god, I have to remember all of these people doing all of these things with each other, and yeah, that kind of stuff can be a little scary. And that's when I will outline, is when I know that the project is big enough that I could get lost in it. Then I'm like, we got to. But even my outlining is terrible. It's mostly just like scribbled notes and things like that, like napkins.
This one has like a whole like digital outline for it. I wrote this one on a napkin.
Ooh.
Yeah, this one I did on a napkin and it worked just fine. So.
Napkin stories are always the best.
Yeah.
I realize I said all that to say, but I will always look back at myself and go, I could have done this differently. I could have done that better. And I think all writers are cursed with that. because you always are cooking, because you've taken a step forward and then you look back and go, I could do better than that last step. But the thing is, you wouldn't be at the step that you're at without that last step. So sometimes you have to kind of let it go. A good example of somebody who couldn't let it go was George Lucas, who said, I will probably be editing these films until the end of time. I'm going to keep changing them and adding things and everything until I'm happy with these movies, and I'm not happy with these movies. And people are like, please stop changing your stuff, you know? And I've gotten into arguments with Lady Epic about this. I am kind of a staunch believer in, once you've written something, you cannot change it. Like, I it's not good, because I don't think that that's absolutely the right answer. But I think that once you have written a story and you've printed it, or you've written a movie and you've made it, and it's in, you know, you've actually shown it, it should never change, because that is now your measuring stick for how you can improve. If you're looking at it and you're going, I could have done this better and that better, and I could have done this better, then now you can go take those notes and improve on yourself. You know? But if you're constantly going back and rewriting something, you're never moving forward into the next step of your writing ability. That's my personal opinion. It's like George Lucas stifled his creativity by spending so much time trying to edit the originals. You know, because he was obsessed with changing them and make them what he wanted them to be. And it's like, no, you have to respect it for what has happened and what it is, and move on. You know? Yeah. You're being good about your dogs in the background?
Yeah, give me 1 second.
No, you're good. So, yeah, chat, I'm going to say this. Don't go back and rewrite your stuff after you've, like...
Sorry, she was stepping on my feet and doing that I need to go outside dance.
Oh, yeah, no, you're good.
Thank you.
No, yeah. Yeah, well, I will always tell people, don't go back and rewrite your stuff.
Okay.
You'll always have something you could have done better, but it means that you've improved as a writer. That's the difference, you know? It's also, yeah. Because that's the thing, you wouldn't publish a book that wasn't done. You wouldn't just be like, yeah, whatever, that's fine. Just send it out there. We'll see what happens. It's like, no.
Blacks enough. We'll put it up on the internet. Let's go.
Yeah. It's like, nope, this is done. I'm happy with it. Let's send it. Or I'm mostly happy with it. Let's send it. And then you go, dang, I could have done this differently and that differently. It's like, yeah, but that's because you're relaxed. You've assessed your story, and now your brain goes, cool, next time. You know?
Do it.
Yeah.
Do it better. Be better.
Yeah, be better.
Be better. All right, we've hit our hour mark, and I promised I would only abduct you, even though you turned the tables on me, for an hour. So
I could keep interviewing. I have more questions.
I'll let you ask one more. And then,
Okay. Because I know that making movies and writing novels are very different mediums, but they also kind of are. I would say our movies are parasitical to novels because there's a lot of adaptations. Do you ever consider, when you're writing your stories, that one day somebody may want to adapt them?
So here's the tricky thing about that. Every time a new author writes a book, in their brain, they're always like, I can't wait for somebody to make it a movie, right?
Yeah.
And that's a lot of ego that they've got in there about that.
Yes.
Yeah, so they're always like, I'm gonna be on the late night show. My book's gonna, somebody's gonna want to do adaptions for it, blah, 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 blah. And that's not true. And I'll tell you why it's not true. It's not true because a lot of the movie adaptions that did happen happened because, one, it was based off of fan fiction that was on the internet for 10 years and had a really big following. And then the person who is friends with the publisher was like, I would like to make some money. Let's go ahead and take that one. Is the plot too detailed? No. Okay, let's go ahead. That would be easy to adapt. So that's usually why I always tell folks, like, it's probably not going to be made into a movie of any kind. This could probably be a rom-com if somebody really wanted to do it. It's about an industry artist that gets together with somebody who owns a comic book shop, right? And part of why I wanted to do this was because I kind of wanted to, in my own way, talk about the struggles that comic book companies and stores are going through when they're trying to order stuff. And so I figured somebody that has to work on, well, they both work on different ends of like the abuse, right? Like industry artists like work like long ass hours and like tight deadlines. And then the shop owners always have to deal with being told like, well, if you want your order, you also have to buy like 15 of like Captain blah, blah, blah that won't sell, right?
Yep.
So I wanted to do that. So that one could be, this would probably never work, like ever, for a couple of reasons. One, it's about a man-eating monster that actually does eat people. And the monster form that I have for this character, I don't think that they could actually do with practical effects whatsoever. So there's that. And then I would also say, I don't know. This one I just don't feel like it would work. It's too. I think I have imposter syndrome now. I'm like, no, it's just not good enough. It won't.
Well, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. You already said you wanted to rewrite it, so it's never going to be good enough. You're like, no, these are the stories that you don't get to read. Let's just, don't talk to me about it when you read it. Just don't talk. I don't want to hear about it. Yeah.
I think the part of the reason I have imposter syndrome is because every time somebody's told me that they've read this book, like they never mention it ever again afterwards. And I'm like, well, you either must have liked it and feel awkward, or you must have hated it and didn't want to tell me. So I've only had probably one person I know who read the book and came and talked to me about it. Was Jordan, who's our video editor at work. And she's like, I really like it, but you could probably do without like this plot line for the love thing. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like nobody's ever said that to me.
Yeah. Well, you have to what is the never attribute malice to something you could attribute laziness. Like I think that's the saying. I butchered that saying. But like in the same way, I know a lot of people that just probably read it and forgot to say something. They probably were just like, oh, that was a good book, and put it down and moved on and did something else or found another book to read and was like, oh, like I forgot to give you notes, because I think people are just lazy.
Yeah, I know that happened with this one because I had 1 month where I sold 100 of these. Like I had a promo and like no book reviews, no nothing. It was just, and the thing about when you write novels is that book reviews are really important to us because that's how people decide if they want to read it or not. So anything like under 30 reviews, like people are kind of like, maybe I won't try it. Yeah. So when I saw 100 of these got bought and that one review came in, it was just like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to start handing this out like to people on the street, being like, hey, want to read my book?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I think everybody has imposter syndrome. Everybody, even like the top of the cream of the crop, unless you're so delusional that you don't, and then typically you're a terrible person.
Don't want to be narcissistic now.
No. I think that what you can say is like, okay, if nobody reviewed my book, like, does that mean you just need to write a sequel and fix the things in the sequel?
Right.
Maybe.
I don't know. Maybe. I don't know if I want to write a sequel to this. I know this one.
Can we convince her to write a sequel?
Probably. This one I know I have several other books in the works on, and the only reason I haven't finished it, I don't know if I told you this really long ass story, but I'll keep it short. Actually, I have to keep it short and I have to keep it vague because I'm under a legal gag order. But because due to the events that led to me getting a gag order, it's been really hard for me to get back into writing because when I try to write it, all I remember is that entire situation, and it makes me not want to do it.
That makes sense. That's rough. Yeah. When an external force is preventing you from being creative, that's rough. That's a really, really, really hard thing for creatives. Yeah. Or when the obligation has been put upon you and you don't want to do it now because like now it's too much pressure. That's how that's how sometimes I get, because I'm like a serial procrastinator, and so then it'll be like, hey, well now you really got to get it done because you have like 2 weeks, and I'm like, well now I'm not doing it. And then I'm like, I have 4 days, I have to get this done. Like I couldn't stand the heat, I have to get this going now. Because
I'm almost done with this ghostwriting project, and it's a 3-book trilogy. And like I started it in January, and I would have had it finished before now, but because I had to check in with the client for book 2, that was the whole reason I didn't finish it sooner.
And I had finished a writing session last week, and I was sitting there and I was like, I have literally written 3 100K word books so far, and I have no excuse for not finishing my own shit right now. So yeah,
That's funny. I like that you're holding yourself accountable.
yeah, I'm like, I just have to write it, just have to do it. I'm gonna get there. So
Yeah, you will get there. I believe in you. And listen, everybody has imposter syndrome. You just gotta do it.
yeah.
Be creative. If you've written a book, you have done more than 98% of people that dream about writing a book. Yeah. Few people actually go out and do. It's hard to go out and do. It's hard to do it consistently as well, because you know that, like, that's the thing about being creative. Most of us are probably have quite an ego. Not all of us. We all get it differently, but some of us are searching for validation. Some of us are searching for accolades and power, and some of us just are crazy and go like, I need people to know what's going on in my brain, whatever. But at the end of the day, the scariest part for an artist is you're bearing part of your soul to everyone around you and going, hey, what do you think about this piece of my soul? And they can reject it, or they can love it, or not respond to it at all. And then you go, well, what does that mean? Like, what does not getting a response mean? Sometimes it means people are lazy and forget to follow up. Sometimes it means maybe they just don't want to be mean to you. But the best thing that you could ever do with that is just make sure that you have friends that will always be honest with you about stuff.
That's true. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. We have a friend like that I know that, like, I'll reach out to and be like, hey, what do you think about this? And this person does not mince words, and they will straight up tell me what they think. And they're like, you asked for this. And I'm like, I know, and they'll be like, it's really good. I'm like, oh, goodness. Or they'll be like, you asked for this. And I'll be like, okay. And they're like, it's trash, and here's why, Yeah.
Yeah. No, those are good critique partners to have for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. You had your question. It's time to wrap up. Where can we find you, and what are you doing that we should know about?
Yeah, I'm primarily focused right now on YouTube. We're at over 1,000 subs over there, and we're growing. And I've been doing like daily live streams. We're playing Metal Gear Solid right now. And if you guys like are excited about that, the Sasuke sisters show up in my chat all the time, so you can.
They love Metal Gear Solid. Yeah.
Yeah, they routinely say very kinky, on the edge things about the different characters and how hot they are and the things that they want to do to those characters. But it's been a blast. So yeah, youtube.com /@epicmike, and you can find me there doing live streams. I'm also on Kick. Those two simul stream when I'm live. And then go over to epicverse.tv. That website, so you guys understand, is a placeholder website. It is not the final product. There, you can click on some of the links, and they will take, or some of the posters, and they'll take you to a link to the video, the trailer associated with them. But that is not the final website. The final website is cooking, and it is not done yet. But when it's ready to go and it's all done, like, we'll make sure that you guys know that, and then you won't hear me shut up about it. I'll be back here, tied to a chair, answering questions.
Okay, outstanding.
Yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
All right. Well, no, thank you for making time. I really appreciate it. Yeah. All right.
I could have gone another hour.
I know, but I told you once, so I'm going to keep my word. That's what I do.
Yeah, I know you do. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's going to be us for today. Thank you guys so much for coming. I will post the announcement. Actually, Timo. Oh, that's not the one. Here we go. Timo is actually going to be our next interviewee next month, who I will probably harass next week for all the things I need for that. So, because Timo, I don't know if you guys knew, came out with a book. Woo!
Ooh, so exciting.
Yes, and we're going to celebrate that. It's a me. It is a you. So, all right. And I will do all the bells and whistles on that later. But we're going to go ahead and end for now. Thank you guys for coming and hanging out. Thank you, mods, for if you had to mod at all. I hope you didn't. But we'll go ahead and end the stream. I'm going to hit the button. I'm going to confirm it. And I will talk to you guys again real soon. So